Hello there, welcome to the channel. As promised, I'm going to be doing a bit on the Duras family. Now this particular episode, if you didn't know from clicking on the video, is going to be about the Duras sisters' bird of prey, a vessel owned and operated by the House of Duras of the Klingon Empire. Now you should be familiar with the Duras sisters, but a little bit of an overview. The Duras sisters, part of the Duras family, they were kind of the rebel family of the Klingon Empire, but also somewhat traitorous. Now I'm going to do a more in-depth video on the Duras family and the House of Duras as a whole, so watch out for that. But in short, the Duras sisters are probably the two most villainous members of the house, the most in bed with the Romulans, and the most effectively duplicitous Klingons we ever really encounter, although it does seem to heavily be a family trait, showing that not all Klingons are as honourable as they like to stand tall and proud and claim. But each Klingon house tended to operate its own fleet. The Klingon Empire wasn't quite as unified as it's sometimes put up a front of being. It was, for the sake of an analogy, and purely as an analogy, it's almost feudalistic. And in fact, it's fairly feudalistic. At one time ruled by an emperor, later a chancellor, who ruled over a high council. Now each member of the high council was from a different ruling Klingon house, as we saw how they were unified in the 23rd century. Now it is possible for other houses to rise to this level and be the great and powerful houses, and these houses have smaller houses that are kind of like their hanger-ons, and they control vast wealth and industry across the Klingon Empire, allowing them to produce and operate their own fleets, a bit like how the old barons and viscounts and other such people of feudalistic Europe, and similar in feudal Japan, the shoguns and others, could operate their own armies, navies and military forces, but would, in theory, have to have allegiance to the king or emperor or whatever particular title, whatever ruler was in the respective country. It's a similar sort of thing in the Klingon Empire. And as a result, you have houses of peoples like the Duras family, like the House of Moog, that will operate their own military intentions and their own agendas, effectively, which sometimes run parallel to, or even contrary to, the interests of the Klingon Empire, as was often with the Duras family. But this one vessel was the ship of choice by the Duras sisters. Now, there are several things to note about this. Despite the reputation and power of the House of Duras, Lursa and Betor chose to utilize a D12 class bird of prey, a ship that was overall decommissioned in the KDF, the Klingon Defense Force, due to it being unreliable and having defective plasma coils. Seems like an odd reason to decommission an entire class of ship, but in terms of size and shape and capabilities, the vessel seems very similar to a Brel-class bird of prey. For reference, a Brel-class bird of prey was the one operated by Krug, which was then commandeered by Captain James T. Kirk in the 23rd century. But there's no information that the D12s were precursors of the Brel, more likely a sister class developed along similar lines, which happened to have defective plasma cores. How many of this class were built isn't entirely clear, but the Klingon Empire identified this problem and removed the ship from service, but obviously vessels that were already built continued to be used. But the Duras sisters, as many Klingons did, preferred the use of a bird of prey for the utility and speed and other such things of the vessels. Yes, Vorchas and Katingas, they were much more powerful, but maybe not as stealthy. But the D12 was an older ship, and that's telling something about the House Duras. It's somewhat fallen from prestige. Why would they use this older ship? If they had the resources and power that they like to claim, why not a Brel class, or a Covort class, or some other variant classes? I assume there are more birds of prey in use by the Klingon Empire, so that's telling in and of itself. The class was allegedly, according to information, developed in the 2350s. But was soon decommissioned, as I said, due to the defective plasma coils and retired from service. It's possible that it is simply a variant of the Brel class, which is my personal theory, so it's less its own class and more a variant of an existing stock type, which is why it was simply decommissioned, stopped being its own class, because this one aspect of it wasn't useful or was bad, but the other variants, like the Brel class, worked perfectly fine, which kind of makes more sense, at least in my headcanon, as to why it's a separate classification of ship. But This vessel did have its problems, but as with many birds of prey, it was armed with disruptors, photon torpedoes, carried a cloaking device, had transporters, shields, much of the stock Klingon technology, and like many birds of prey, it had the foldable wings, implying a capability of entering a planetary atmosphere and landing if necessary, and was generally warp capable, but its exact top speed is unknown. But if it's in keeping with other birds of prey of its similar size and type, it would have had a maximum warp capability of warp 8, with a maximum emergency speed of perhaps 9.6, and probably a cruising velocity of around warp 6, maybe warp 7, but it had defective plasma coils, and the cloaking device is a pretty energy intensive system. My guess would be the lower end of that spectrum would be more accurate. We saw the Duras sisters utilize this vessel for many years. Now, there were a few variations we saw in its bridge layout, which could imply they were utilizing more than one ship, or perhaps they simply refurbished the design, had it refitted and upgraded, which would make sense, because again, this is maybe an older ship, but refitting it would probably be easier than acquiring an entirely new ship, especially when your house has somewhat fallen out of favor with the High Command and other leaders of the Klingon Empire, the Klingon High Council, should I say. So an upgrade probably seems fitting. We saw the vessel utilized for various covert operations, including arms dealing, the smuggling of stolen ore, which they were caught doing, and also, of course, the kidnapping of Starfleet officers and their torturous interrogation by Elorian passengers, to later engage with a Galaxy-class starship, where we would see the end of this vessel, and so far, from what we can tell, the end of the Duras sisters, because I don't think they emergency beamed out at the last second, and I can't see Picard or Riker or anyone going, "No, no, save the sisters and their crew, their nameless crew of Klingon red shirts." But no, this was the end of them. This was achieved by, of course, the vessel modifying its frequencies of its energy weapons and torpedoes to match those of the Enterprise D, allowing them to penetrate its shields. Now, I've done a whole video in the past about how this battle still should have gone the Enterprise's way, considering the sheer size and power of a Galaxy-class starship versus a Klingon bird of prey. But the plot armor was strong with this one, and for some reason Riker forgot where the fire button was for the phasers and photon torpedoes, because simply put, the phasers should have been able to strip the shields of the bird of prey despite the fact the vessel was being hit, and a few photon torpedoes should have simply annihilated a D12 class bird of prey. They were no match for them. So, the takeaway is, don't punch above your weight, because they did still lose despite having the advantages. Worf was able to engage the vessel's cloaking device by exploiting the weakness in the plasma coils, causing the ship to cloak, lowering its shields, and then Riker remembered where the fire button was and ordered a torpedo to be fired, which then destroyed the ship in a very similar fashion to how General Chang's bird of prey blew up, which makes me think maybe Chang's bird of prey was also a D12 class, because, you know, that blew up from some photon torpedoes, and it had a very similar destruct pattern. As did Krug's. Weird. Anyway, that is Lursa and Bator's D12 class bird of prey, their personal cruiser, and ship they used for all their nefarious plans to reconquer the Klingon Empire in the name of the Duras house, either to install themselves as leaders, their brother as leaders, or potentially their son, the unnamed son of the Duras sisters, which I will get to in the next video, which will be about the house Duras as a whole. Let me know in the comment section down below what you think of the Duras sisters before we get onto that video, and the house Duras in general, and anything else you think I should mention in that video. I'll try and incorporate it. I'll look into it. If there's anything I missed on this one, please let me know. And with that said, we're at the end of this video. Please like, share, and subscribe, and bye-bye.